Mr. Ganesh Rajaram.
Mr. Chairman, sir, a year ago at this very Committee of Supply debate, I spoke about the sorry state of Singapore football. And before I get into the state of football in Singapore again, let me just explain why the sport of football is so important to our country. Football is the most popular sport in the world, and not surprisingly in Singapore too. Across the island, it is a common sight to see children of all races running around kicking footballs in void decks, open spaces, and grass patches. The sport builds social cohesion, nurtures resilience, and teaches the spirit of teamwork from a very young age. It is also one of the few sports that can bring a nation together, as those of us old enough to remember the Malaysia Cup days can attest to. There is also a significant amount of public funds that go towards supporting football in Singapore. According to an article in Today Online in January 2017, Sports SG administers an annual grant of some $25 million from the Tote Board, a statutory board, for the development of football and the S-League, our local professional football league. So a year on, where are we exactly with football in Singapore? The much anticipated Football Association of Singapore elections took place in April of last year, and a new team was voted into the FAS Council to oversee the sport in the country. Although many in the new council were from the previous team that managed football in the country, they promised change and a new dawn for the sport in Singapore. Mr. Chairman, sir, when I made my speech a year ago, Singapore was ranked 164th in the world. I didn't think at the time that we would do much worse. Today, we are ranked at 173, an all-time low. Our senior national team has not won a competitive football match in over a year. We have yet to secure a win since we beat Cambodia 1-0 in a friendly match way back in November of 2016, close to 16 months ago. We are now ranked behind countries like Laos, Cambodia, and St. Grenadines. The results for the other age groups, teams, are similar, if not worse. Our national coach's contract was renewed by the interim FAS Council in the run-up to the elections last year, despite not achieving the set target of a semi-final berth at the ASEAN Football Federation Suzuki Cup in 2016. When his contract was renewed last year, the national coach was set a target of reaching the Asian Football Confederation Cup finals in 2019. This goal, too, has not been achieved, as we have failed to qualify for the tournament. Mr. Chairman, given the dismal results over the past year and a half, what kind of KPIs, key performance indicators, has Sports SG set the FAS with regard to the national team? Has the FAS set a timeline for the national coach to start delivering results? And now that, for the second time, targets have not been met, what are the FAS's plans with regard to the position of national coach? Mr. Chairman, one of the other challenges facing the new FAS Council elected last year was to revive the fortunes of the ailing S-League, our professional football league, which has been plagued by low attendances. In November of last year, 6 months after taking office, the newly elected FAS Council unveiled its plans for the S-League and the development of football in the country. The new council has decided to emphasize youth development, and this is at the core of a raft of changes instituted. From this new season, every S-League squad will have at least 6 players who are under the age of 23. And when the team takes to the field, a minimum of 3 players in the team of 11 have to be under 23 years old. And another new rule is that the foreign signings quota will be reduced from 3 to 2. Mr. Chairman, sir, while the emphasis on youth is admirable and shows a long-term approach to the game, it does beg very obvious questions. One of the key challenges for the new FAS Council was to reinvigorate the S-League. How does the council aim to fill the seats at stadiums across the island when untested and unknown youth players will be taking to the field? If the quality of play was a major factor for fans staying away from the stadiums, how will the fielding of players who themselves are learning entice fans to come to the stadiums? Another major area of concern emanating from this emphasis on youth is coaching. Do we have the ecosystem necessary to facilitate this youth development and to ensure that the under-23 players have what it takes to compete in the S-League? There was also a recent announcement by the FAS that it will partner privately run football academies to grow the quality and pool of youth talent. However, Mr. Speaker, the devil, they say, is in the details. How is the FAS going to ensure that the quality and standards it desires are achieved and that coaches have the necessary credentials? Most of these academies hire ad hoc part-time coaches who may have played football at a senior level but are not qualified or trained to nurture young talent. But the bigger and more pressing issue is this. While this emphasis on youth is good for the future, what happens to the here and now? Football youth development will take years, if done well, with an adequate coaching setup to achieve the kind of standards we aspire to. Meanwhile, world and Asian football is not going to stand still and wait for us to catch up. Are we satisfied with continuing to be has-beens in local and regional tournaments in the foreseeable future? We are already at our worst ever ranking at 173. I do hope we are not in the race to be the worst ranked nation in the world of football, the dubious honor currently belonging to Tonga at 206. So what can we expect for the new season of the S-League that is about to kick off at the end of this month, and football in general? Beyond the emphasis on youth, one good development is the strong efforts by the FAS to stamp out smoking among footballers, particularly the younger players. Personally, I'm baffled that it took so long for the FAS to act on this, given that any sport, not just football, should have a zero tolerance for smoking and require athletes to be in peak fitness. Regardless, better late than never, so it's a good move on the part of the FAS. Mr. Chairman, another positive move is the recent tie-up between the FAS and the Sports Hub, which makes the National Stadium the home of the Lions. My concern is that with the dismal results and quality of football, will we be doing justice to the magnificent stadium by playing matches with empty terraces? I hope I'm wrong, and while the FAS has stated recently that fans should not be fair-weather fans and should show our support for the Lions, surely we must also acknowledge that when you have had horrible weather for a year and a half, even the most die-hard fan cannot be criticized for praying for glimpses of sunshine before turning up. Ultimately, it is the performance on the pitch, not rhetoric, aesthetics, or partnerships that will determine how many fans show up. Mr. Chairman, sir, the first competitive match for the Lions this year will be against the Maldives on the 23rd of March at the National Stadium. I do hope that a win for the Lions will be the beginning of a good year for Singapore football. And I hope very, very much that my next speech on sport will be a celebration of our football successes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, sorry.
We all hope so too.